We on Fire Sports Podcast, The Spot, season number 4, episode number 49. And yeah, man, welcome in, man. First and foremost, I hope you guys had a great weekend. Hope you guys was able to sit back and unwind and kick back as we're in the month of May. Got Mother's Day coming up this weekend. So I hope you guys have moms in mind. Either your mom is still with you or she's not here anymore. Definitely look out for the moms, man. It's, to me, a whole week celebration for the moms coming up. But, man, we had an exciting sporting landscape across the weekend. Boy. The NBA playoffs is heating up. As now we got the first round concluded in the NBA playoffs. We had a couple game 7s over the weekend. You know we gonna get into that. Oh man, boy, things were straight cracking, man, over the weekend on the NBA tip. Also, speaking of professional basketball, the WNBA is back in the fold. Yeah, you gotta speak up on behalf of the ladies, man. The ladies are back into effect. You know, WNBA, they got a little spike in popularity last season. It was Caitlin Clark's first season in the WNBA. She brought some excitement into the WNBA and just all across the board, just fans of just basketball as a whole. Definitely was enjoying what we had last season. Hopefully the New York Liberty, they're looking for trying to win another WNBA championship this season. And obviously you got to speak upon Caitlin Clark, man. It's her second season with the Indiana Fever. Last year they bowed out in the playoffs, man. A lot of people predict this year they'll make a long playoff run. So we're going to get into that. Obviously we got a newcomer too in the WNBA, Paige Breckers, fresh off a NCAA championship with the UConn Huskies, man. She's making her debut in professional basketball, man. So it's an exciting time on the basketball tip. Also MLB, man, into effect as well, man. Just baseball as a whole. I'm not going to front though, man. I'm excited about my Chicago Cubs, man. We in first place in the division, playing some real good baseball, man. Went up north to 94 North. That is what we call Wrigley North around the way, up into Milwaukee to handle the Milwaukee Brewers over the weekend, man. So I'm just excited about that. And like I said, baseball as a whole, can't forget about that NL West too. That's cracking as well. Probably the best division in Major League Baseball. So we're going to dip our toe in a little bit of that baseball as well. Also, we got breaking news, man. Breaking news across the NFL. The NFL is always going to be in the media cycle, man. Even during the off season, as we are a couple weeks now away from the NFL draft, is that the Baltimore Ravens have cut Justin Tucker. The kicker, Justin Tucker, a couple years ago, as Jay-Z would say, it's all good. Just a week ago, Justin Tucker, a couple years ago, man, was the best kicker in the National Football League. I mean, he was kicking 60-yard field goals like they was layups, and now he's jobless. And one, it goes just upon his performance last year with the Baltimore Ravens. I mean, this guy missed a bunch of clutch kicks last season, man, for the Baltimore Ravens. And then we had the movement off the field, man, with the whole spa accusations, very similar to Mr. Deshaun Watson. And I just thought that it was in the best interest for the Baltimore Ravens to move on from Justin Tucker. In my opinion, I think they should have cut Justin Tucker, soon as these, stories start to come out after the NFL season. They should have cut bait with him at that point. I'm not sure if it was a contract, type of move. NFL kind of tricky on that, as far as roster bonuses and things of that particular nature. But I knew his days was numbered last year just based on his performance. And then you got the off the field stuff. I just knew that, pretty much it was going to be a done deal for Justin Tucker. So the Baltimore Ravens ceremoniously move on from him. But man, we got to get into these NBA playoffs. As I mentioned, man, we had a couple game 7s over the weekend. We also too had a game 1 in the second round. But I'm going to circle, man, back to the Los Angeles Clippers and the Denver Nuggets. This was a series that I knew coming in that this series was going to go 7 games. Soon as I seen these two teams match up, it was an automatic 7-game series for me. And the Los Angeles Clippers, they've been playing some good basketball, man, going into the playoffs. They was hotter than fish grease. Kawhi Leonard, man, just putting on that Superman cape, back to his old business. James Harden, having a great season for the Los Angeles Clippers from the time that, Kawhi Leonard was out. Also, too, going into the playoffs, The Denver Nuggets, they were a team coming into the playoffs where a lot of people had lost confidence in the Denver Nuggets. And me being kind of one of them. Because this is a team that I championed, maybe about a week before the playoffs, right before they fired Mike Malone. I thought that the Nuggets, based on the matchup, had a potential chance to make a run through the Western Conference playoffs and potentially get themselves back to the NBA Finals again. They fired Mike Malone, and I'm like, man, I'm not sure what we're going to see from this team. But the Nuggets, man, they advanced into the second round, man, with a 120-101 win against the Los Angeles Clippers. And to me, this game was more out there than just what the final score just says. I mean, at one point in this game, man, the Nuggets was up by 30 in this game. The first person I'm thinking about, man, and it's just this whole swag with the Denver Nuggets, man, was Russell Westbrook. Boy, did Russell Westbrook come out with some big-time energy in this game, hitting a couple threes, man, hyping up the crowd. Funny thing about it, we all remember Russell Westbrook, last season with the Los Angeles Clippers, where he had a good season with the Clippers. The Clippers decided to move on from Russell Westbrook and not bring him back. And the Denver Nuggets, quick, fast, in a hurry, scooped up his services. And boy, did it pay off on Saturday, man. And this was a huge win from a confidence standpoint from the Nuggets, because the Clippers is a good team. Like I said, they had the two-headed monster in James Harden as well as Kawhi Leonard. Great coaching by Tyronn Lue. You just had, the others, Norman Powell and just, Chris Dunn, playing some good ball for them as well. And I knew coming in, man, and I said this on Friday's show, the Los Angeles Clippers was going to go as far as what James Harden was able to bring to the table. And boy, did it rear its ugly head again. So we're going to peel the onion back, man, on Mr. James Harden, because, fans of the show, OGs of the show, and definitely if you're first time listening, man, I appreciate your ear. We on Fire Sports Podcast, The Spot. We provide hot fire takes and analysis across the sport landscape. And if you're an OG of the show, I appreciate the check-in. And you all know, if you're an OG, man, how I feel about James Harden. This is a guy that I've been critical of with just his movement over the last couple of years. This guy's a regular season player. It was a big time question mark going into Game 7, which James Harden was going to show up. And we all knew which James Harden was going to show up, which is sad. We all knew that James Harden was going to be a guy out there that was going to be passive, and he was going to put all the pressure on Kawhi Leonard and the others for the Los Angeles Clippers to get them out of this hole. Especially, it's a tough situation when you go on the road in a game number 7. You got to fight the energy of the crowd. You got to fight the momentum of the crowd as well. The momentum of the game and the ebbs and flow of the game. And this guy go out and had 8 field goal attempts from a dude who was just like a machine gun, man, shooting the basketball, also distributing at the same time at the height of his powers. And I'm just done with fam. As far as just a playoff situation. This guy just got baby nuts when it comes to the playoff time. And we keep it real on We on Fire Sports Podcast, The Spot. This guy got baby nuts. And we see it every single time when it's money time with this guy. He come up small as hell. And I like James Harden's game. I think that, he's one of the most underrated passers we've probably seen in the history of the league, especially from a guy that's known to putting up, and averaging 30-plus points a game. This guy's a former MVP award winner, in his days down in Houston. But we've seen this time and time over again, this guy having baby nuts. And Kawhi Leonard, he ended up with 22 points in the game himself. I expected a bigger effort from Kawhi Leonard from a standpoint of just a more point production. But I can't be mad at his effort. I mean, he went out there and, he tried. But it was surprisingly, man, he only had 13 field goal attempts in this game. And for me, it's just like, man, even though he was able to get to the line and he was aggressive, he shot 9 free throws in this game and hit 8 of them. But it was still like, dude, this game 7. You got to go out with a blaze of glory. This is the final game of the season if you lose. And just seeing these dudes come up small, man, was just sad to see. Harden ended up with 7 points. Norman Powell, who was a guy that most people said during the All-Star break, he should have made the All-Star team. He had only 9 points in this game. So if you went in and you told me, Derrick Jones Jr., who's been a good asset for the Los Angeles Clippers, would outscore James Harden and Norman Powell in this ball game, I already knew that it was going to be a blowout from the Denver standpoint. And, just sad, man. And the Clippers, we'll see what they do next season. This is a team that, one, they're getting a little older, obviously, with Leonard and Mr. Disappearing Act James Harden at the helm. But that doesn't, give me a distaste as far as just the job that Tyronn Lue has done this season and just kind of moving forward. We'll see what they're able to do just with their organization. It was a smart move for them moving on from Paul George. A lot of people was critical of them at that time, but I think it was the best thing financially for this ball club to give them some kind of flexibility moving forward. And as we all know, the Western Conference is just tough sledding, just to say the least. So, it's just a situation, man. We'll see what they do moving forward, man. The Denver Nuggets, man, they move on into the second round. And they looking at, OKC right now is a team that a lot of people, even though they have the best record in the league, a lot of people don't have a lot of confidence in OKC, even with them sweeping in the first round. So I can't wait for this matchup, man. We'll see what it do, and I'll preview it. And obviously the second round, man, and how I feel in my predictions with the second round, coming up a little later in the show. But definitely, man, I was impressed by the Denver Nuggets being able to handle that lightweight and dispose of the Los Angeles Clippers, and they move on to the second round. So coming up, man, we're going to get into the Golden State Houston Rockets in the epic game number 7. Also, too, we got game number 1 that jumped off as well between the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Indiana Pacers, as the Pacers still game number 1. So, man, it's just cracking all across the board. Also, too, we're going to preview, the game we got coming up tonight. We got the Boston Celtics and the New York Knicks. And like I mentioned a little bit earlier, got the Denver Nuggets taking on the Oklahoma City Thunder. So we'll definitely get into that. So first and foremost, I appreciate all the love and the feedback. I appreciate you. Yeah. We on Fire Sports Podcast. The spot. Welcome back. And we had a epic game 7, another epic game 7 that jumped off yesterday. It was a game that I couldn't wait for, man, just to see the legacy of the Golden State Warriors, more notably Stephen Curry, as well as Mr. Draymond Green and Steve Kerr, as they face an elimination game with the upstart Houston Rockets. Houston Rockets was a team last season. They just missed the playoffs. Ironically, the Golden State Warriors was the team that jumped the Houston Rockets the last couple of days of the regular season last year, man, to end the Rockets season. And ironically, these two teams faced off in the first round. Now, this was a series coming in. I actually had the Golden State Warriors in 7 games. I just thought that the Warriors, they would just bring that veteran presence, man. And just for a young team like the Houston Rockets, it'll be a lesson, learned from them. And I was spot on with that, as the Warriors was able to move on 103 to 89. The game played down in Houston, and Houston ironically came in, the playoffs with the second seed in the West. There was a lot of people just across the league and just basketball lovers as a whole didn't really have a lot of confidence in the Houston Rockets. I think that their confidence was a little less than what we've seen from people across the league with Oklahoma City, because simply they was a young team. And 2, we all knew that whoever they played in the first round was going to have an equal ability to be able to knock them out of the first round. And this game was interesting enough for me because I like in the beginning of this basketball game just the defense actually that the Houston was playing on Stephen Curry. They was going out there, they was blitzing, they was keeping what I call a man in the hole as far as the driving lanes is concerned. And Steph Curry went basically the whole first half without a field goal. Which, to me, if you'd have told me that coming into this game, especially with it being played down in H-Town in Houston, I would have thought that the Houston Rockets would have blew out or have at least a double-digit lead over the Golden State Warriors. But it was the others for the Golden State Warriors. And first and foremost, man, shout out Buddy Hield, coming up with the epic 33 points in this game, man. Buddy Hield was shooting the cover off the basketball. He had the glow, looking like, just, Klay Thompson 2.0 pretty much. Being able to, eat off of Steph Curry being just double teamed and just all the action on him. And I like what I saw from them. Also, I like the energy that I saw from the Golden State Warriors. In Game 6, this team didn't have no energy at all. And it was surprising, especially, the game being played out there in San Francisco, just with the epic crowd that they have. It was just, at the Chase Center, it was just like, man, it was like a funeral or something. It was real odd to me. And so, even though I had Golden State winning this series in 7 games, I had my trepidation about Game 7 because I didn't know what Golden State team was going to show up. Obviously you got Jimmy Butler is a little bit more healthier now, with the, little pelvis injury that he had, a couple games ago. And so I knew Jimmy was going to come to play. He's just that guy. Jimmy was able to kind of, play a good game as far as just staying even keel, being able to hit those mid-range shots that Houston was giving to him. It was a lot of, acrimony about Golden State as far as just their post play from a defensive standpoint. And I'm going to keep it 100. I felt that Sengun had been eating Draymond Green lunch pretty much all series long except for one game. And I knew that, Houston was going to go to him. And yesterday, he didn't play a good game, Sengun. Even when they had smaller guys matched up on him, he just didn't have a good game. He tried to play that old man Park game, man, backing down from the basket, from the free throw line, and he just wasn't efficient at all. And I think that for the Houston Rockets, they got some questions they need to answer, especially too as far as them being a young team outside of Fred VanVleet. Obviously Fred, man, is an OG NBA champion. I really wasn't worried about Fred. I knew he was going to come and just kind of play with that effort. And you kind of saw that early in the first half where, he was just kind of looking at his guys like, man, let's kick it into gear. We got an opportunity to knock these dudes out. And to me, the biggest, guy that was on the milk carton was Jalen Green. And he was a guy that has been inconsistent this whole playoffs. Outside of having that 38-point game early in the series, he's been on a milk carton. And to me, it's just like him not being able to get kind of an ebb and flow into the game. And a lot of that comes with just youth. Just being able to be in your first NBA playoff situation. You got to understand the ebbs and flows of the game, man. And just be able to, if you're kind of uneasy in your game, dude, you got to be able to get to the line. This guy's a good driver, one of the most athletic players in this league, but he was unable to get any kind of stable ground in this game. And, Dylan Brooks, to me, he played, to me, above the level that he's, typical playing. And so, for me, it was just like Houston was just kind of going through the motions a little bit. And in the second half, man, you saw the Golden State Warriors really, put the pedal to the ground, especially in the fourth quarter. After about a couple minutes in the fourth quarter, I knew this game was over. Houston, like I said, they're just a young basketball club, and they're still trying to get their footing and still trying to figure out, man, who's the man on this team. Because that's the biggest question. Sengun made the All-Star game this year. I think he's probably the most efficient player that they have as far as talent and efficiency. But he got to have a riding partner with him. Fred VanVleet is able to give you that little oomph. But guys like Jabari Smith Jr., to me, he pretty much was kind of on the milk carton, in this playoff series. And this is a guy that was taken fourth overall in the NBA draft a couple years ago. So to me, he kind of like wet the bed a little bit. Jalen Green wet the bed a little bit. And so it was just real interesting just to see just what I call a team that has veteranship on it versus a team that is pretty much kind of an upstart. Now, shout out to A-Man Thompson. He had an outstanding game, man. He's one of the young budding stars and budding two-way players in this league, putting up to 24 peaks. He came to play. He wasn't scared of the moment, just being out there, like I said, on both ends of the court. So shout out to him. But other than that, man, this wasn't happening. And especially for a guy like Jalen Green, only to have 8 field goal attempts in this game. He had as many field goal attempts as he had points. And, like I said earlier, Jabari Smith, 3 points, man, 1 for 5 from the field. And so I just, didn't like what I saw from this team. And they went kind of short, too, because, Houston only played 8 guys. So Ime Udoka, man, he's an outstanding coach in my opinion. I think that Houston and general manager Rafael Stone, they'll kind of get back to the drawing board with this ball club. There's been a lot of heat with Jalen Green as far as the Houston Rockets being able to shop his services over the summer and potentially bring in a guy like a Kevin Durant. And I just think that for Houston, it may be in their best interest to do so. Now, Rafael Stone, he said, going back a little bit early, I think around about the trade deadline, I was hearing him saying that basically if they do bring a guy in, they want to kind of keep him on the same age timeline as the guys that they have. But at some point, you got to look around the Western Conference and really see that, hey, we may have to kind of pivot from that philosophy and kind of go with a more veteran guy, a guy that you can go to and get a bucket. And the best guy you got out there that would be, say, available would be Kevin Durant. So I just think that, Houston may have to circle the block on that and take another look and a deep dive on that, man, to figure out what they're going to do moving forward in regards. Once again, man, shout out to the Golden State Warriors, man, getting out of epic 7-game slate, getting themselves into the second round of the NBA playoffs, man. And so we'll definitely see, what they do moving forward in the next series, which, I'll preview coming up just in a little bit here. But we can't forget about the other NBA game that we had on Sunday, which was game number 1 between the Cleveland Cavaliers as well as the Indiana Pacers. And the Pacers, this is a team that was fresh off the dismantling of the Milwaukee Bucks. It was definitely interesting to see just the Pacers for the second consecutive season, be able to get themselves into the second round. Cleveland's a team that won 60-plus games, this season, number 1 seed in the NBA in the Eastern Conference. And this was a team, as most, and I would agree, that I thought, them and the Boston Celtics would be on a crash course to the Eastern Conference Finals for an opportunity for Cleveland potentially to go to the NBA Finals. And the Pacers came up into Cleveland, man, and stole game number 1, 121-112. And to me, the biggest thing about this is you got Darius Garland out. And I'm just going to keep it all the way 100. If Darius Garland misses consecutive games or more than one game in this series, Cleveland is in trouble. Trouble. They're in trouble because Tyrese Halliburton, he on one right now. He had 22 points, 13 assists. He's playing some of his best ball of the season. There have been a lot of talk, during the regular season of the NBA, him, one, being overrated. Also, two, him just overall just not having really kind of his best season this season. But he's picked up his play in the playoffs. He's playing some outstanding ball, just being efficient with the basketball as well, passing the ball. And Indiana's one of those type of teams, man, is that you appreciate them more when you watch them. If you look at this team on paper, with Nembhard and, just the other pieces that they have, they don't jump out at the page on you. But when you watch them play, Rick Carlisle has done an outstanding job with this team. They play good team ball. And they smell blood, meaning that when they do smell blood, they get at you. And so, Miles Turner, to me, one of the most underrated, big men in the league. Cleveland is ripe to get knocked out in this series. Like I said, but it's really all about Darius Garland. To me, it's a speed versus speed type of matchup between him and Tyrese Halliburton. Shout out to Donovan Mitchell, man. Donovan Mitchell had 33 points in this game. But we've seen over the years, when Donovan Mitchell has to carry the weight big time for his ball clubs, even going back to the Utah days, his teams normally don't win when he have those big scoring outputs. And so they're in a hole, But I don't think, to me, I think they got an opportunity to bounce back. Obviously, game 2 in Cleveland is a must-win game for the Cavaliers. They got to win game 2. And I think that just they have to make some adjustments. And we'll see what Kenny Atkinson can do in that. Because to me, Kenny Atkinson is one of the best coaches in the NBA overall. But without Darius Garland, they got to make some pivots. I just think that also, too, they got to be able to get the ball to Evan Mobley, man. To me, he's the key, especially with Garland being nicked up. You got to be able to get some big-time buckets out of Evan Mobley. I think he's the most talented front-court player they have. Obviously, you got Jarrett Allen as well, who's played some outstanding ball so far in these playoffs. But those two guys got to be them guys for Cleveland. Also, word on the street is that Darius Garland may not play in game number 2. And also, too, DeAndre Hunter looks like he's kind of iffy for game number 2. So it's not trending real good for the Cleveland Cavaliers. Like I said, man, the Indiana Pacers, this was a team that got to the Eastern Conference Finals last year. People kind of forget about all of that. But this is a team that kind of smelled blood a little bit. And we'll see if the Cleveland Cavaliers is able to kind of bounce back and get themselves, back in the right footing in this series. So we'll definitely see what it do. And coming up, I'm going to get into what I call, man, my previews, man, in round number 2. Just my breakdowns of what I think across the board in the Eastern and the Western Conference in round number 2, and my predictions of teams that will move on out of the second round. So we'll definitely see what that do. First and foremost, man, I appreciate all the love and the feedback. I appreciate your ear. We on Fire Sports Podcast. That's spot. Before we get out of here, man, don't forget, man, to check your boy out on YouTube. We on Fire Sports Podcast. Yeah, we jumping off on YouTube. As well as you can catch your boy out on Twitter at We On Fire Sports. Definitely getting it in over there as well. Also, too, you can check out the podcast on Podbeam and where all podcasts can be listened to. Also, too, man, you can check your boy out, too, on the Weekly Dog Sports Betting Podcast with my man Mako Scott and Esalim, Mr. Taylor Street. I'm not sure if I'm going to keep calling him Mr. Taylor Street or Mr. West Coast, Mr. Green, Golden State Warriors. Definitely he's been making a lot of, guest appearances out there on the West Coast, man. So shouts out to my man E as well on 95.7 The Game out there, man, out there in Frisco. So, these playoff matchups, man, in round number 2 is exciting. And I'll start off on the west side of things, man, in the Western Conference. You got the Denver Nuggets, man, matching up against the Oklahoma City Thunder, man, in round number 2. And this is going to be an interesting series as this series jumps off in a couple of hours from now, man. Game number 1 as the Nuggets have to travel up to OKC in that tilt. Now, this is going to be an interesting series for me. Because you got the best player in basketball, Nikola Jokic, hands down to me, he's the best player in basketball. But the guy that's probably had the best season and maybe the reigning MVP award winner, the throne, my man, Nikola Jokic, is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And this guy averaging 30 points a game this regular season. They was able to dispatch the Memphis Grizzlies 4-game sweep in the first round. So they've been sitting back chilling in the cut, man, for a nice little minute, waiting on that 7-game series to conclude between Denver and the Los Angeles Clippers. And the Nuggets, to me, they playing some good ball. Murray, I think he's finally kind of, got back to kind of Jamal Murray. But to me, it's really all about Michael Porter Jr., especially in a series like this. Especially from the standpoint of just the wings that, Oklahoma City has. And Oklahoma City, they're the best defensive team in the NBA. Statistically, and what we've seen just so far this season, they're number 1 in every defensive category across the board. So the defense is definitely going to be on one. Hardenstein's been playing some good defense, man, from the center position. Obviously, you got Chet Holmgren out there trying to block some shots, and just the wing defensive players they got from, Jalen Williams. Cason Wallace coming off the bench for this team. Can't forget about Lou Dort, one of the best defensive players in the league overall. So the Denver Nuggets going to have to come and get it in this series. And to me, it can't be just all Nikola Jokic. It has to be Murray, and just the others have to play at a supreme level. Now, for me, it's going to be in this game 1 coming up later on this evening. It's going to be a litmus test as far as the Thunder, they've been rested for a minute. Maybe they got the edge knocked out of them. The Denver Nuggets, this is a team that just was fighting for their lives over the weekend. And so, to me, for Denver, for them to try to win this series, man, in my opinion, they got to steal game 1. Because obviously they don't have home court advantage, so they got to be able to get a game in Oklahoma City. And I think this is going to be the lesser of the 2 evils, man, at Oklahoma City in game number 1. I just think that, from a standpoint of you got really 2 young coaches. Mark Daigneault's done an outstanding job in Oklahoma City. You got, young Adelman Jr., son of, longtime head coach Rick Adelman in the fold for the Denver Nuggets. And so this is going to be a test of nuts from him. He's going to have to bring it, man. And so I don't know about this series. This was a hard one to predict. Now, most people would think that, the Nuggets, they got a fighting chance in this series. And I think this team got a chance to, go and make a nice little run and potentially maybe get to the NBA Finals. You never know with this ball club. I mean, this is a team that won the NBA championship, 2 years ago. So they got it in them. I just think the Oklahoma City Thunder, man, they just playing just like a well-oiled machine. The good defensive team. I just think that last year they kind of, got, just the experience, a little bit of what they needed. Well, Denver's going to be a tough out. So to me, this is the toughest series probably for me to predict in the second round. But we're going to go ahead and put it out there, man. Scared money don't make no money, man. I got the Oklahoma City Thunder, man, winning this series in 6 games. Now, I'm saying it a little bit with my chest, but I got Oklahoma City, man, in 6 games in this series. I just think that because they got out of the first round, they swept the Memphis Grizzlies, They didn't get a situation where they had to play any extra games. They pretty much going in this series healthy. I think that's going to serve them well. And I just think that they'll be able to get out of this series just simply based on the fact that I don't think that Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. is going to be consistent enough to be able to get this team over the hump. So we'll definitely see what it do, man. As I mentioned, this game coming up in a few moments, a little later on this evening. But I got the Oklahoma City Thunder, man, winning this series in 6 games. We're going to keep it in the West. We're going to keep it West Coasting with the Minnesota Timberwolves taking on the Golden State Warriors, man. This is a matchup, ironically, of the 6 and the 7 seed. And this is going to be an interesting one. Real interesting one for me because the Minnesota Timberwolves knocked off the Los Angeles Lakers. That was a series that I actually had the Lakers winning, even though, I really wasn't, saying it with my chest. I just thought that the Minnesota Timberwolves, they've been up and down all season long. Obviously they made the trade, with Karl Anthony Towns, for Julius Randle. And Julius Randle was playing like a man in that series against the Los Angeles Lakers. I mean, he was playing like a bull in a china shop. And I think if he plays the same way in this series with that same kind of umph, the Golden State Warriors is going to be in trouble in this series. And so it's just going to be real interesting to see, man, what it do. And this one is another one. In the Western Conference, we all knew this going into these playoff series, that these boys are very, very hard to predict and say this one. I do think that this series is going to go 7 games, though. I got this going 7 games. And for me, in 7 games, man, I'm going to tilt on the side of the Minnesota Timberwolves, man. I got the Minnesota Timberwolves winning this series in 7 games. I wouldn't be surprised. And Dub Nation, don't come after me. Isalim, don't come after me. I just think that the longer this series go, when you get into a 6 and 7 game type of situation, I just think that the Minnesota Timberwolves just have younger legs, man, and they got my man Ant-Man that is ready. He'd already then killed 2 superstars in this league so far in the playoffs with Luka Doncic and, Mr. LeBron James. We even go back to last year with Kevin Durant, and he trying to get another body, man, right now. He the body snatch out here. And I think that if this series go long like I predict, I got the Minnesota Timberwolves, man, moving on to the Western Conference Finals in the 7-game epic series in that one. And then we're going to transition to the East Coast, as I mentioned a little bit earlier. The Cleveland Cavaliers already down 1-0 in this series against the Indiana Pacers. The Indiana Pacers, man, playing some good basketball right now, man. Very confident team after the dismantling, that they did, the Milwaukee Bucks in round number 1. Tyrese Halliburton, man, living his best life right now, playing some outstanding basketball. And, Darius Garland, to me, him being hurt. Also, you got Hunter being nicked up. DeAndre Hunter being nicked up. Man, even though Ty Jerome has been playing some outstanding basketball for the Cleveland Cavaliers, it's going to be tough sledding in this. Now, I predicted the Cleveland Cavaliers to go to the Eastern Conference Finals, them and the Boston Celtics, early on in the season. I'm going to still keep faith in the Cleveland Cavaliers, but it is waning. And boy, so I'm going to go ahead and put it out there. I got the Cleveland Cavaliers winning this series, but this thing going 7 games, I believe. I think Garland, I'm not sure if he's going to play in game number 2, but, definitely if Cleveland lose both these games at home, man, they might be cooked. But I'm going to stand on business, man. I got the Cleveland Cavaliers, man, winning this series in 7 games. It's going to be an epic series. It's not going to give you the same boom for your buck as far as the other series is concerned. It's not, one of the sexiest series that we got in this little 4-series slate. But I just think that the Cleveland Cavaliers, man, they're going to tough it out and thug it out, man, and be able to get out of this series, man, and get to the Eastern Conference Finals. So we'll definitely see what that do. And finally, we got the Boston Celtics and the New York Knicks. This game will be played literally in a few minutes here. And the Celtics coming in as the 2 seed, man, the Knicks coming in as the 3 seeds. The Knicks, they was able to get past those pesky Detroit Pistons in a good 6-game series. And the Knicks, for me, is just really about, man, just what they're able to bring to the table with the others. Now, Jalen Brunson, he's been playing outstanding during the playoffs, man. I mean, he just played like that guy in that closeout series. Straight like that guy in the playoff series. I mean, Mr. Clutch so far. But the Boston Celtics is a different animal. And I think the most important thing about the Boston Celtics is everybody is healthy for Boston. Nobody on the injury report. Obviously had Jason Tatum. He was a little nicked up early in the series or in the playoffs. Him and also too Jaylen Brown, had a little knee tweak. But it looks like they all set and ready to go. And Boston just got too much firepower, man, for the New York Knicks. I think the Knicks will make it kind of a, competitive series. It even may go 6 games. But I got the Boston Celtics moving on, man. They just a juggernaut right now. Like I said, it's really about the others. Kristaps Porzingis, to me, if he just plays at his level, I can't forget about the matchup between, Drew Holiday, man, and Jalen Brunson. That's going to be a must-see matchup, just to say the least. And just Derek White as well, man. So they got a couple pieces they can throw out there on Jalen Brunson. So we'll definitely see what it do for them. But I got the Boston Celtics, man, moving on in this series, man. I'll be polite and say that this thing going 6 games. I really think it's going to get closed out in 5 for the Boston Celtics. I just think they just too much for the New York Knicks, man. So we'll definitely see what it do. And so, man, that's my look across the NBA playoffs. As I mentioned, man, things are definitely heating up across the playoff landscape. So can't wait, man, for later on this evening and also, too, man, later on this week, man, as these games are heating up, these series is heating up. So I can't wait to dig in a little bit more just in all what we got. Also, too, man, we'll probably get into the next episode a little bit later on this week. Just my look across Major League Baseball as well. Can't forget about MLB. As I mentioned a little earlier, too, the WNBA is heating up now as they preseason into the fall. So they're getting a little closer to the regular season. Definitely the ladies are back. So we'll definitely see what that do, man. So I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. Sit back and unwind, man. Don't get too stressed out with the job and other responsibilities, man. Check out what we got across this sport landscape. First and foremost, man, I appreciate all the love and the feedback. I appreciate you. Yeah. We on Fire Sports Podcast. The spot.